On a ship at sea, this friend named Shinpei was sitting and checking his phone when the blonde friend Ushio suddenly called him. She asked Shinpei to close his eyes and then did something, though Shinpei didn't understand what she was doing. After opening his eyes, Ushio curiously asked Shinpei how long it had been since he returned to his hometown. She said it had been 2 years for her. After saying this, Ushio went straight to the ship's deck. Shinpei had thought Ushio would return with him this time, but no. Ushio smiled, saying goodbye to Shinpei, saying she couldn't go back with him anymore, and hoped Shinpei would take care of Mio for her. Then Ushio disappeared before Shinpei's eyes, despite him shouting and rushing to stop her. Suddenly Shinpei bumped into something soft. He broke out in a sweat and looked up to check. It turned out everything he had just seen was only a dream. He was so scared that he frantically apologized to the girl sitting opposite him, then immediately received a hard slap to the face. After the incident, Shinpei couldn't sit in his old seat anymore. He moved to another place to stand, standing while encouraging himself to stay calm. Thinking back, Shinpei had never been slapped before. This experience was quite new. At this time, the ship announced it was approaching the final station, Wakayama town located on the Kitten Strait, with a population of only about 700 people, and the local specialty is black squid. This is a small island with tourism as its strength, and Shinpei had returned to his hometown after nearly 2 years, to attend the funeral of his childhood friend Ushio. Shinpei took a deep breath as he was preparing to pull his luggage away, when from up the slope a girl on a bicycle rushed toward him calling his name. The girl couldn't brake in time and plunged straight into the sea. This was Mio, Ushio's sister. Seeing the girl still in such a mood made Shinpei quite confused, since her sister Ushio had just died only a day ago. Shinpei reached out to help Mio surface, then they went home together. As they walked, Mio asked Shinpei about his experiences in Tokyo, which Shinpei didn't know much about since he hadn't traveled around much. At this moment, Mio suddenly burst out laughing, complimenting Shinpei that compared to 2 years ago, his Japanese had improved a lot, making Shinpei very embarrassed. They walked and chatted with each other, and eventually arrived at the funeral home. Ushio's photo was placed on the altar, while her body lay in the coffin, surrounded by mourners. In Shinpei's hand, he tightly held a flower, recalling past events. 10 years ago, when his parents died, Ushio's family had adopted him. They had lived together very happily. For Shinpei, this was a family. 2 years ago, when he was preparing to go to Tokyo, Ushio had wanted him to make curry for her. He had refused and promised Ushio next time. But now there was no next time anymore. Shinpei sadly placed the flower in the coffin. The people around gossiped about Ushio's death. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared as someone took a photo at the place despite it being forbidden. Shinpei was about to turn around to question this when a friend rushed over and hugged his neck, sobbing. Sue told Shinpei about Ushio's death, how she had been swept away by the current while trying to save a child from drowning. Sue blamed himself. He had been there but couldn't save Ushio. Sue cried uncontrollably, wanting Shinpei to hit him, saying he would take it all. But Shinpei didn't do that. He just gently put his hand on Sue's shoulder to console him. Things had already turned out this way. Hitting Sue wouldn't change anything. After he calmed down, Shinpei brought up the fact that Sue's father had performed an autopsy on Ushio, which made Shinpei somewhat curious. Wasn't Ushio drowned? Hearing this, Sue pointed Shinpei toward a little girl standing opposite. The girl was Shiori, the daughter of the Koba supermarket owner, who was also the girl Ushio had saved. It was pitiful that the child was too young to have experienced such a shock. The time had come and the ceremony would begin immediately. The pastor called Shinpei over to help him. Before he left, Sue whispered to Shinpei, promising that tonight he would contact him again to tell him everything that happened. That evening, after Ushio's funeral, Shinpei returned home to cook for the family. After a while, Mr. Elaine returned. They sat down at the table together. This time Shinpei had cooked curry. He had even prepared a portion for Ushio too, even though she was no longer here. Late at night, Mio stood outside looking at her family's restaurant. A police officer on patrol noticed Mio. He spoke up curiously asking, and Mio just turned around and smiled. Meanwhile, Shinpei at this time was in his room hearing everything from Sue. All those rumors about Sue's father performing an autopsy on Ushio were false. The truth was that Sue's father was only present at the investigation at the request of the police. And Sue had learned one thing. Ushio had a mark on her neck, and Sue was certain this was a choking mark, meaning Ushio had been choked to death by someone. That day, Sue and Ushio were playing behind the school when they saw little Shiori being swept away by the waves. Ushio had rushed in and saved the girl, while Sue stayed on shore and didn't see anything suspicious. This was secret information that only Ushio's family and Sue's family knew. Because no evidence was found, the police could only rule it as an accident. At this moment, suddenly there was a knock on the door. It was little Mio. She came to give Shinpei the necklace that Ushio had worn until her death. Then Mio hugged Shinpei and cried uncontrollably. Although she appeared strong, at some point Mio couldn't bear it anymore. The girl gritted her teeth, swearing she wouldn't forgive the person who killed her sister. Shinpei was startled, quickly pushing Mio away and pressing her with questions. Could it be that Mio knew something? Mio immediately misdirected, changed the subject, and ran off to take a bath, saying nothing more to Shinpei. Shinpei returned to his room and sat looking at the necklace. This was an item he had made for Ushio in the past. Shinpei's hands trembled, and he burst into tears, never expecting Ushio would cherish this cheap item so much. The next morning, the restaurant returned to operation. The best way to forget sadness is to bury oneself in work. Shinpei was sure Mr. Elaine and Mio were thinking the same as he was. At this time, a drunk fat man called Shinpei over, asking if he had found the busty girl he had told him about this morning. Shinpei looked very confused. He hadn't met the man this morning. The man was drunk and had mistaken him for someone else. A police officer walked into the store and sat down, complaining about the heat. This was Tatsu, a relative of Mr. Elaine's and the only police officer on the island. Being a regular customer, Mio knew what he liked to eat. Then the girl curiously asked Tatsu why he hadn't come here for breakfast this morning. Mentioning this, Tatsu's face became serious as he told them that this morning the Kobeya family had disappeared. As soon as she heard this, Mio rushed straight outside, making Shinpei have to run after her. He went to the Koba supermarket. As Officer Tatsu said, the place was already closed. Mio was sitting down in a corner, sad. Seeing this, Shinpei came over to sit next to her. Mio now told Shinpei about the strange thing. About a month ago, Shiori was still a lively girl, until she told Mio that she had met someone who looked exactly like herself. Right then, a man's voice rang out explaining to them that what Shiori had seen was a shadow. This man was Nezu, the island's hunter. Mr. Nezu explained simply for them to understand, the shadow that Shiori saw was a disease endemic to this island. Now it was rare, but during the war, it was very common. This disease allows the person to see the shadow of themselves, but they will die right after, and the shadow will continue to disguise itself, killing more people. To escape this, one must go to Haruko Temple to be purified. After saying this, Mr. Nezu left. Mio's face had become more serious. She turned to ask Shinpei if he believed this story. Of course, Shinpei didn't believe it. Until Mio told him a truth. 3 days before Ushio died, she and Ushio were picking up trash on the beach when they met someone who looked exactly like Ushio. Then 3 days later, Ushio had really died. Mio was certain this was the truth. This made Shinpei break out in a sweat. He tried to stay very calm and asked Mio if she had told this story to anyone else. Then Shinpei encouraged Mio, inviting her to go to Haruko to investigate more about the shadow with him. They went to the temple together to meet Haruko. While Shinpei was ringing the doorbell, suddenly Mio saw something in the bushes. Shinpei couldn't see very clearly, but Mio was certain she had just seen little Shiori. They both quickly chased after her to some ruins near the beach. At this point, Shinpei stopped Mio and wondered if that was really Shiori. Why would she run away like that? Suddenly a gunshot rang out, startling them both. Shinpei and Mio ran to check and saw a girl lying with her stomach wounded. She had been shot, and Shinpei recognized her immediately. The girl was the one who had sat on the same boat to the island with him. Mio was scared, screaming that she wanted to run and find help. But the other girl pulled Shinpei's collar closer to her. She demanded that Shinpei listen carefully to what she was about to say. But before she could do anything, a bullet shot straight through her head. Shinpei fearfully turned to look and saw Mio being held hostage by another Mio with a gun to her head. She smiled and pulled the trigger, killing Mio, and then Shinpei, leaving him unable to do anything. Shinpei screamed, calling for Mio, and then again bumped his face into the chest of the bespectacled woman on the boat. Going back to about 3 days before when Ushio had just met with an accident. Mio was holding little Shiori in her arms, staring blankly as Sue administered first aid to her sister. Sue was sweating profusely, trying to help Ushio regain her heartbeat. He turned to call Takiko to run back to the school to bring the defibrillator here. Shinpei was standing next to Mio. He didn't quite understand how he could see this scene. Following Sue's shout, Shinpei also shouted, and once again, he bumped his face into the chest of the bespectacled woman on the boat. Shinpei's face flushed red as he frantically apologized to her. Of course, he got slapped again, but suddenly at this time, she spoke up, asking Shinpei about the nightmare he had just had. Shinpei's face looked perplexed as he stared at the woman, and right then he remembered the scene of her sitting slumped against a tree trunk, shot. Shinpei broke out in a sweat, probing to ask her if she had ever been shot. Looking at her confused face, Shinpei knew the answer. He scratched his head, admitting he had mistaken her for someone else, and picked up his bag. Shinpei pulled out his phone from the bag, and he was shocked to find that today was still July 22nd. Clearly on July 23rd, he had gone with Mio to find teacher Haruko. Shinpei fearfully held his head, trying to encourage himself that it was all just a dream. Then he opened a novel online. This was The Swamp Man, a horror novel very popular in his hometown city. About the content of the novel, it told of a young girl who was haunted by the thought that her friends and relatives were replacement copies. Shinpei told himself that because he had read this horror novel, he had dreamed a nightmare, that's all. The boat had finally docked. Shinpei pulled his suitcase off the boat and sighed, trying to regain his composure. At times like this, he needed to take a step back. Shinpei was still very suspicious of the nightmare he had just experienced. It was as if everything had really happened. Shinpei had just started pulling his luggage when Mio's call rang out again. The girl was cycling down the slope towards him. This made Shinpei completely dumbfounded. How could this be so similar to his nightmare? Mio couldn't brake in time and plunged straight into the sea. Even the girl's underwear was identical to his dream. Shinpei reached out to pull Mio up from the sea. Then he discovered that Mio's brakes seemed to have been cut by someone. But what happened afterward also repeated exactly as in the dream. Even the relatives behaved exactly the same. Shinpei and Mio arrived at the funeral home. As soon as they met Mr. Elaine, he emotionally ran over and embraced him. Entering the funeral home, Shinpei stood, wondering if this was reality or not, if it was a dream or if he had really returned to July 22nd. Shinpei's head was thinking so much it felt like it was about to split in two. Shinpei now remembered what Sue had told him, that Ushio had been choked to death by someone. Shinpei clutched the flower tightly, looking at Ushio lying in the coffin. What on earth had his friend gone through? Shinpei placed the flower in Ushio's coffin. He was about to leave when another flash of light appeared. Shinpei was startled and quickly turned to check. Before him was the family of little Shori. He immediately remembered what had happened in his dream. If it was real, then tomorrow this little girl's family would disappear. Then the following things would happen like this and that. Shinpei organized his thoughts, then was again pulled away by Sue, who cried and lamented. That evening at home, sitting at the dining table, Shinpei had many thoughts as he secretly watched Mio. He wondered if Ushio had seen the shadow and been killed by it. Could Mio also have the same outcome as in his dream? Shinpei wasn't concentrating on eating, making Mr. Elaine speak up to ask. So Shinpei excused himself to go outside for some air. He recalled the scene earlier when Mio had cycled to meet him. The brakes had clearly been cut by someone to harm Mio. But who on earth did this? Too many questions with no answers made Shinpei feel very nauseous. Just then, Uncle Tetsu's voice rang out, waking Shinpei. He turned sharply to check and saw Uncle Tetsu calling little Mio, asking why Mio was standing in front of her own house like this. Shinpei's face turned pale. How could Mio be out here? But before one surprise ended, another came. Mio pulled out a knife from somewhere and straight away killed Uncle Tetsu right in front of Shinpei. Now Shinpei was certain. This wasn't Mio but the shadow. After killing Uncle Tetsu, the fake Mio controlled her shadow, immediately creating an exact replica of Uncle Tetsu, from his appearance and voice to his personality, all copied perfectly by the imposter. Then Mio ordered the fake shadow to pretend to be Officer Tetsu from now on, then asked it to return the gun to her. Seeing that this fake Mio still hadn't switched places with the real one, the fake Tetsu advised her to just rush into the house and deal with Mio. With this gun in hand, things would be much simpler. The fake Mio immediately refused, saying firing a gun at night was very dangerous. This wasn't America where you could just shoot as you pleased. Today they were only here to scout. Shinpei was so scared he covered his mouth and bent down, trying to breathe as quietly as possible. Just then, the phone rang. It was Sue calling. Before Shinpei could turn it off, the fake Mio was already standing right over his head. Shinpei didn't have time to react or change clothes before taking a knife straight to the neck. He collapsed in pain, red blood oozing out. At this time, Shinpei's vision shifted to another place. He saw himself lying motionless on the ground. Beside him were the fake Mio and the fake Tetsu. Suddenly Shinpei was pulled into an endless void. He drifted within the void. Someone's voice rang out calling Shinpei, startling him. It was Ushio from behind. She hugged Shinpei, asking him to help protect Mio. Shinpei shouted out loud, calling Ushio, and then he was taken back to the time when he had just pulled his suitcase off the boat. Shinpei collapsed, clutching his throat. He wondered, hadn't he already died? Could it be that he had been given another chance? While he was afraid, Mio's voice rang out again, followed by Ushio's messages that Shinpei had just heard. Protect Mio. This time, Shinpei rushed out to block the bicycle, not letting Mio plunge into the sea again. But in exchange, he himself fell into the sea. Shinpei didn't know how to swim and began to sink. Fortunately, Mio had promptly pulled him up. On the other side, the busty woman was now hanging herself from a tree, recording what she had done while preparing to come to the island. Her gaze kept turning toward Shinpei and the family of little Shiori. In her final words, her face became serious, as if she knew there was an intruder in the organization already. That night, when Brother Tetsu was leisurely reading adult magazines, he received a phone call. The caller was Shinpei, reporting to him that there was a fight near the shopping area. Of course, this was just a lie, so that Brother Tetsu wouldn't patrol past his house anymore. Shinpei told himself he had to try to survive through this night. Sitting before Ushio's altar, Shinpei knew that this would be very dangerous, but he had foreknowledge of what would happen, so he had to try to change it. He had also informed Sue that he would contact him tomorrow. After that, Shinpei returned to his room. He deleted all unnecessary apps from his phone to free up storage for video recording. As a precaution, Shinpei also turned on airplane mode and prepared a backup charger. He knew exactly when the fake shadow would appear, so he had enough time to prepare everything. After setting up the camera in a position that was difficult to detect, Shinpei returned to lock his door tightly, standing dazed in the bathroom trying to recall the experiences he had gone through. In the first ice sky, he hadn't been killed on July 22nd. The sound of flushing water rang out in the bathroom. Shinpei was quite sure Mio was bathing, but to be certain, he had rushed in to check once and was thrown a shower head by Mio, causing his nose to bleed. But that was enough to prove Mio was still safe and hadn't left the house. Early the next morning, Shinpei left the house to retrieve his phone and check. Sure enough, the fake shadow had come to stand in front of his house. So Shinpei took the phone up to the room to show Mio. Mio's face was scared when she saw her holding a knife in her hand. Now she was sure she had come to kill her. Then Mio told Shinpei that Ushio had also encountered the shadow before she died. Mio stood up abruptly and grabbed Shinpei's hand. If the shadow was real, wouldn't little Shiori be in danger too? They needed to inform her right away. Shinpei understood that. Little Shiori must have encountered the shadow already, but he didn't want Mio to take such a risk. Shinpei held Mio's hand back. He agreed to help Shiori but said he would go notify her alone. So Shinpei went back to the Koba supermarket. Although he arrived very early, the store was already closed. Shinpei sighed deeply. Everything was still the same, he couldn't change this yet. Just then, a woman's voice rang out. It was Mrs. Shiomi, who saw Shinpei standing in front of the grocery store. She teased Shinpei that living in the city had made it difficult for him when there was nowhere to buy things. At this time, Mrs. Shiomi noticed something strange. The Koba store was closed without any notice. So she and Shinpei went to the Koba house to ring the doorbell and call. But they waited for a long time with no response, so they took the liberty of opening the door and going in to check. In the house, food was still on the table, the TV was still running, but the whole family was gone. Shinpei and Mrs. Shiomi split up to search. Just then, Shinpei saw a black stain on the ground and on the sofa. His face broke out in sweat because this was the work of the shadow. Yesterday he had also seen Tetsu's shadow make him disappear just like this. In Shinpei's mind now there were two trains of thought. One wanting him to protect others, one not wanting to because the opponent was a monster. In the end, Shinpei chose to inform others and wait to see the situation, because the opponent was a monster. He was tired of being killed. Just as he was taking out his phone, Shinpei paused. He looked at the dining table, paying very close attention. The food was still on the table, proving they had been attacked last night. On the floor surface, there were dents. This was a sign that something had hit down here very hard. Shinpei broke out in a cold sweat. What on earth had happened here? After that, he asked Mrs. Shiomi's permission to go upstairs to check. Based on the black marks he saw below, they were so big they were likely an adult. Shinpei worriedly walked upstairs to find little Shiori. He pressed against the wall to find the position of the light switch. At that moment, he felt something behind his back. It seemed to be little Shiori. Shinpei was completely dumbfounded and immediately realized that what he had encountered at the funeral home yesterday. He had asked little Shiori if she had seen anyone who looked exactly like herself. Now little Shiori behind Shinpei also asked him back. Why did he ask her that? Was there something strange? Now Shinpei was certain. The person he met was not little Shiori, but just a fake shadow. Shinpei fearfully turned to look at little Shiori. It seemed she also knew she had been discovered by Shinpei, so she didn't hesitate to summon a shadow to prepare to kill Shinpei. Shinpei was scared, sweating profusely, and not knowing what to do. When at this moment Mrs. Shiomi's voice rang out calling him. When she didn't hear Shinpei answer, she came up to find him. Just moments ago, Shiori had stood in front of Shinpei, but right now she had disappeared without a trace. Shinpei also understood that thanks to Mrs. Shiomi's intervention, he had kept his life. However, he had already been marked by this shadow. After that, Mrs. Shiomi reported the disappearance to the police, while Shinpei left the Koba house. On the way back, Shinpei was still lost in thought. He had two choices. One was to just let today pass as if nothing had happened. But if he did that, then certainly the bespectacled girl he met on the boat would be killed by the shadow. And looking at her reaction, Shinpei was quite sure she already knew something. The second choice was that he would save her. This choice was quite feasible because Shinpei knew what would happen next, and this time he hadn't met her on the boat yet. When time reversed, he was standing at the port. Shinpei recalled when he met her on the boat. Beside her was a very large suitcase. It seemed this girl didn't just come here for tourism. So Shinpei went to ask all the inns on the island to find her. Despite describing her extensively, no one knew, but as soon as he mentioned the huge breasts, he got information right away. Just then, Shinpei remembered the scene the first time he returned here. This uncle had also asked him if he had found the bespectacled busty girl yet. He pointed Shinpei to a cafe, but when he went to look, she was already gone. Unable to find any more clues, Shinpei returned to the restaurant. At this time, Tetsu had just arrived. His words and the way he blamed Shinpei for falsely reporting the fight last night made Shinpei sigh with relief. Surely he hadn't been killed by the shadow yet. At this time, Tetsu pulled out a phone from his pocket and handed it to Shinpei. This was Ushio's phone. She had given it to Tetsu before, asking him to give it to Shinpei if anything happened to her. Everything was so intertwined and complex that Shinpei didn't know how to solve it now. At that moment, Sue came to the restaurant to find Shinpei. He and Mio had taken Sue outside and told him everything. Now Sue understood. Ushio had been killed by little Shiori's shadow, and as Shinpei had just shown him, the shadow's next target was Mio. There was no way to identify the shadow, which meant that the three people standing here could potentially be disguised shadows. The suspicion of each other made everyone sweat with fear. Sue spoke up to break the tense atmosphere. The fact that the shadow could appear on camera proved that this was a living creature, not some kind of ghost or demon. As long as it was a living creature, Sue believed there was still a way to deal with it. At this time, Mio suddenly spoke up, inviting Shinpei to Haruko Temple to learn more about the shadow. This made Shinpei remember immediately. The first time he returned here, he had also gone with Mio to Haruko Temple. But no, Shinpei didn't want to go there because he knew the shadow was lurking somewhere nearby. So he made the excuse of wanting to go tomorrow, and was then reproached by Sue that tomorrow was the summer festival, the busiest day of the temple, so the abbot wouldn't have time to receive Shinpei. But for Shinpei, the more dangerous, the safer. So Shinpei persuaded everyone to go tomorrow. Before returning, Sue wanted everyone to come up with a password to be able to identify fake shadows. In front of Sue, who always trusted himself, Shinpei still didn't trust him 100%. Until he knew how to distinguish from the shadow, he wouldn't trust anyone. He knew it was very despicable, but it was necessary at this time. After parting with Sue, it suddenly rained heavily, making Shinpei and Mio run like wet rats looking for shelter. While Shinpei was complaining that the weather forecast hadn't said it would rain today, Mio spoke up asking Shinpei how long he planned to stay on this island. Being reminded by her made Shinpei remember that initially, he had only planned to attend Ushio's funeral and leave right away. This made Mio tighten her pants, looking very sad. The girl blurted out that she wished Shinpei could stay here forever. But anyway, Mio gave the shell necklace back to Shinpei to keep. After the rain stopped, they both got home. Sitting in his room, Shinpei tried to guess the password for Ushio's phone. But even after entering Ushio's birthday, it was still the wrong password. He kept trying to guess the password until a knock on the door startled him. He thought it was the shadow coming to find him. But no, it was Sue and Takiko coming to call him to attend the summer festival. They were wearing beautiful yukatas, and Mio was also wearing a yukata, which surprised Shinpei a bit. Sue pulled Shinpei to a corner and whispered. This was the method he had devised to distinguish the shadow, although he didn't know if it would be effective. But Mio in a yukata looked cute too. They all went to the summer festival together. While Mio and Takiko were enjoying the festival, Sue and Shinpei just sat in a corner observing. At this time, Shinpei spoke up, lamenting to Sue that he had left the island for 2 years. He thought that time had helped him mature, but now he found it hadn't helped at all. On the contrary, he felt more pressured. When Shinpei couldn't be by Ushio's side at the most important moments, seeing Shinpei so sad made Sue angry and cursed Shinpei to his face. Ushio's death wasn't Shinpei's fault, and besides, right now Shinpei had to protect Mio too. He couldn't keep being depressed like this. At this time, Takiko and Mio ran to where they were. Mio had told Takiko everything, about how Shinpei had sneaked into the bathroom when Mio was in there. This made Sue furious, grabbing Shinpei's neck to question him, but it was just playful reproach because he knew Shinpei couldn't have feelings for family members. Sue turned to remind everyone to focus together. After the fireworks ended, the abbot would have time to receive them. At this moment, a blonde girl suddenly brushed past Shinpei's face, startling him. Tokiko wanted to take everyone into the temple to prepare in advance, but Shinpei refused to let everyone go first, then rushed after that blonde girl. Shinpei's face became serious because he recognized at a glance that the person was certainly Ushio. Shinpei rushed like a madman to search. Following the traces of that girl, he went straight to the shore. Just as the fireworks went off, he also met Ushio again. She was standing in the sea looking at Shinpei and then smiled. Shinpei, dumbfounded, called out to Ushio. At that time, she rushed straight to hug Shinpei tightly, pinning him to the ground, then happily asked when Shinpei had returned without letting her know. Shinpei listened and broke out in a sweat. He only paid attention to the necklace on her neck. It should only have one, and Mio had already given this to him. Shinpei regained his senses and crawled out from under Ushio. He bluntly declared that the person in front of him wasn't her. Ushio had died 2 days ago. Hearing this, Ushio still smiled and denied it. She was still alive, right in front of Shinpei here. Shinpei still didn't believe it. He was certain the person in front of him was a disguised shadow. So Shinpei asked Ushio if she remembered anything. Mentioning this, Ushio's face went blank. She also wondered why she was here. She held her head, lamenting that a lot had happened, but she just couldn't remember everything. What she remembered was only the pain. At that time, she was under the sea and everything gradually became dark. Saying this, suddenly Ushio stood up. If she was under the sea, then hadn't she died already? Why was she standing here now? Could it be she had turned into a ghost? Ushio looked down at her feet. But if she was a ghost, shouldn't she be floating in the air? Saying this, Ushio suddenly burst into tears. She remembered now. Her last wish before dying was to meet Shinpei. Surely this was the reason she had come back. Shinpei was completely dumbfounded. This voice, these expressions, they were exactly like Ushio before. What strange thing was happening? After that, Ushio helped Shinpei up to watch the fireworks. Standing beside Shinpei, she let him know she had one more thing she wanted to tell Shinpei when she met him again. The girl ran right down to the sea, smiled and declared to Shinpei that she liked him. Shinpei's face flushed red. He still couldn't believe what Ushio had just said. He asked Ushio back, could it be that death had made her like this? Ushio laughed when she heard this. So this was what Shinpei thought of her. She also felt her mind wasn't very clear. Shinpei clenched his fists, telling himself this was just an imposter. Ushio was dead already. What was this thing in front of him trying to aim for? Shinpei still wanted to know the reason why Ushio had come here. This, even Ushio didn't know. She should have gone to heaven. After that, she turned to point out to Shinpei the fireworks exploding in the sky. The girl smiled and explained she wanted to go to the festival with Shinpei. After saying this, Ushio enthusiastically ran off. She was wearing a swimsuit, entering the festival, making Shinpei very embarrassed. He hurriedly grabbed Ushio's hand and ran away. Dressed like this was too inappropriate, and moreover, if people discovered her, he wouldn't know how to explain it reasonably. Meanwhile, the shadow disguised as Mio was standing dumbfounded, staring at the knife of the squid butcher. At that moment, it had seen Shinpei pulling Ushio's hand and running away. As for Shinpei, he had taken Ushio to a corner to hide. Ushio's face showed extreme confusion as she asked Shinpei why he had taken her to hide. She was hungry and wanted to eat some delicious food and also wanted to meet her sister Mio. Shinpei immediately refused because Ushio was dead. Meeting her now would be too dangerous, and he didn't know how to protect Ushio anymore. Ushio angrily punched Shinpei in the stomach, then warned him she didn't want to hear these nonsensical things. Shinpei collapsed, holding his stomach. Hitting first, then warning indeed, this person was very similar to the Ushio he used to know. After that, Shinpei sat down to talk with Ushio. He told her about the 2 years since he left the island, and even their childhood memories together. In the conversation, Shinpei tried to probe. Ushio remembered everything, even the name of the author of her favorite work. However, only the shadow as Ushio couldn't remember anything. At this moment, the phone rang. It was Mio calling. Recognizing her little sister's voice immediately, Ushio cut in, calling Mio and startling the girl. Shinpei hurriedly pushed Ushio away and explained to Mio. After that, Mio called Shinpei to quickly return. The fireworks had ended, and it was time to go meet Abbot Haruko. So Shinpei hurriedly pushed Ushio into hiding. He explained and advised Ushio not to leave this place. It was very dangerous outside right now. After finishing, Shinpei hurriedly returned to find Mio's group. On this island, there was a very strange legend. People said that anything that drifted here carried its own soul. That god was named Haruko. Ships drifting to the island were collected instead of discarded, then burned to perform the Omiokiri purification ritual. Standing looking at the big fire burning, Shinpei noticed that there were many people around this place. At least thousands of people were here. Suddenly Mio spoke up, calling Shinpei. It had been a long time since they had gone to a festival together. Mio wondered if going to a festival after her sister had just died was appropriate. Surely Sister Oshio would have wanted to go too. After that, Sue called Mio aside to talk. Shinpei stayed with Takiko. Takiko revealed to Shinpei that Sue had already decided. Tonight he would confess to Mio. Shinpei was quite surprised to hear this and wished for Sue's wish to come true. But Takiko was quite sure it wouldn't happen because she knew Mio already had someone in her heart. At this time, Sue suddenly shouted loudly, calling Shinpei and Takiko. With all his courage, he had actually confessed to Mio. This made Shinpei and Takiko gape in astonishment. Mio was also embarrassed, her face completely red. But she quickly regained her composure, then rejected Sue's confession. Just then, a masked person appeared behind Shinpei and Takiko. Looking at this appearance, Shinpei immediately recognized it was Ushio. After being masked, Ushio thought no one would recognize her. But Sue and Mio only needed to hear her voice to know. Being discovered, Ushio didn't need to wear the mask anymore. She took off the mask and smiled, complimenting her sister on how beautiful she looked in a yukata. Mio's face contorted as she shouted out that this wasn't her sister, but a monster. At that moment, Shinpei had stepped over to stand right next to Ushio. This frightened Mio, who wanted him to get away from this monster. But strangely, Shinpei now looked very odd. He was gripping Ushio's hand tightly, causing her pain, then uttered a sentence that left them all dumbfounded. Sue hurriedly stopped Mio. What Shinpei had just done wasn't like him at all. That was the shadow, not Shinpei. Shinpei smiled an evil smile and transformed back into the shadow right in front of everyone. The real Shinpei at this time was running back to Mio's place. Just as he reached the stairs, in front of him was the fake Mio holding a bloody knife. In the blink of an eye, she had teleported in front of Shinpei, grabbed his neck, and lifted him up. The speed and terrifying strength made Shinpei unable to react in time. The fake Mio looked at Shinpei in a very puzzled way. She knew about Shinpei recording her image. She threw Shinpei straight back and then advanced. Shinpei was sweating profusely, seeing countless black marks on the ground below. How many people had this thing killed here? The fake Mio sat down next to Shinpei, probing why Shinpei knew in advance what would happen. Could it be that traitor had reported to him? This question surprised Shinpei very much. Who was the traitor? At that moment, someone stepped toward them. It was the fake Shinpei. He was trying to search through Shinpei's thoughts. Shinpei watched but couldn't do anything. This was his shadow copy. It seemed he had been copied by the shadow since he went to Shiori's house to investigate. Not good, this shadow was searching through his thoughts. If he knew about the loop, it would be disastrous. What to do now? Shinpei really thought until his brain was exhausted, but had no solution against this kind of monster. At that time, Mio had lost patience and was about to kill Shinpei, when the fake Shinpei stopped her. He had searched Shinpei's thoughts very carefully. After death, Shinpei would return to July 22nd, with all related memories from before. If this was true, and it seemed Shinpei couldn't reverse the past by himself, then for now, just let Shinpei live. Because if they let him reverse time once more, he might find a way to fight against them. This explanation was very reasonable, so Mio withdrew the knife in her hand. The fake Shinpei asked Mio to send a subordinate down to capture Ushio, then smiled mockingly at Shinpei. How pathetic that in the end, he couldn't protect anyone. After that, he ran up to the festival, leaving Shinpei with the fake Mio. Shinpei didn't accept this. He tried to crawl after them. Even though Mio broke his arm, he didn't give up. Seeing Shinpei so stubborn, the fake Mio was about to break his legs too, when a gunshot suddenly rang out. A variable had arrived. The busty girl he had met on the boat to the island was standing right behind the fake Mio. She shot her a few shotgun blasts straight to the head, enough to make her collapse. Shinpei turned around in bewilderment, and he had recognized her. Looking at the miserable Shinpei lying on the ground, the girl sighed and complained to Shinpei that she hadn't even gotten to taste the specialty dishes on this island before she had to go to work. Pain surged through Shinpei, making him grimace. At this moment, Mio's shadow collapsed in front of Shinpei, startling him. The other girl remained very calm. From behind, a black shadow glided across the ground, rushing straight toward her. Although it had been shot straight in the head, the fake Mio wasn't dead yet. From the black streak on the ground, it emerged, holding a knife intending to stab the bespectacled girl. Somehow she still managed to dodge and spun around to fire her gun. This time she wasn't shooting at Mio anymore, but directly at the ground, at that black streak. The fake Mio now paused, giving her a compliment for dodging that attack. After that, she vanished. Shinpei was completely dumbfounded and amazed that this person could defeat a shadow. The bespectacled girl then came over to administer first aid to Shinpei's wounds. She smiled brightly and introduced herself to him as Nagumo. As for her purpose on this island, it was simply to save Shinpei. However, looking down at the black streaks on the ground, she sighed deeply. It seemed she had arrived a bit too late. Just as she finished speaking, Nagumo sensed something. She pulled Shinpei into the bushes and signaled him to be quiet. A shadow was approaching. Shinpei looked through the gap in the bushes. Ushio's figure running by startled him. Hadn't he told Ushio to stay in the shelter? Shinpei wanted to break free and run after her, but was stopped by Nagumo. The shadows were gathering up there. At this time, if Shinpei went, it would be very dangerous. Shinpei still couldn't understand. Could this woman distinguish the shadows? Seeing this, Nagumo explained simply to Shinpei. The thing standing on the shadow was simply a mass of flesh. Its true form was the black streak lying beneath the ground. That's why they hated being stepped on. When someone tried or accidentally touched them, they would move to another place to avoid it. Nagumo held her gun and stepped out of the bushes. Everything she had just told Shinpei was valuable information passed down from her sister. The shadows scanned humans with light, then took over the target's memories. Why did they do this? Simply because they needed nutrients. They ate memories as nutrition for themselves. Nagumo now pointed to the ground. These remnants of black streaks were the remains of the unfortunate people. Over the past 3 days, the number of shadows had increased significantly. No matter how many were killed, it wasn't enough. Nagumo herself also felt a bit strange, as if they were acting for some purpose. Purpose? Shinpei immediately remembered Mio's face. Just then, a flash of light appeared above the temple. Shinpei fearfully turned to ask Nagumo for help. He begged her because his family was up there. After that, Shinpei rushed up quickly. Watching Shinpei's back as he ran, Nagumo had to wonder if he could save everyone. When Shinpei arrived, he saw Takiko standing motionless. At Shinpei's feet was a large pool of blood. Seeing Shinpei, Takiko burst into tears, and then immediately after, she was stabbed from behind and collapsed. Nagumo now arrived, hurriedly pointing her gun and ordering Shinpei to step back. In front of Shinpei, a bizarre black shadow stepped forward. Behind it was a mountain of corpses piled up, making Shinpei break out in a cold sweat. The shadow uttered a sentence. The hour had come. It would pull this curtain. Just a moment ago, the temple was very bustling, yet now it was flooded with the smell of blood. Shinpei trembled, his brain numb, not knowing what to do. Unconsciously, he just counted the number of shadows here. At that moment, Shinpei saw an extremely horrific scene. Su using his body to shield Mio. Su's head was bleeding, and he collapsed in front of Shinpei. The fake Su shadow laughed out loud. It was also curious about human preferences. It didn't expect Su would dare to shield Mio like this. It was too fun. It was preparing to eliminate Mio when gunshots rang out. Nagumo shot off the fake Su's arm, then put her hand in her pocket to get more ammunition. At that moment, she discovered that the black shadow in front of her had created a clone that also knew how to hold a gun. In an instant, Nagumo sensed danger, quickly dodging to one side to escape with her life. The black shadow now spoke up, probing them. Their appearance up here meant they must have defeated Mio's shadow, right? Shinpei angrily shouted out. Immediately, the shadow shot out tentacles, tightly wrapping around Shinpei's body. It pulled Shinpei over to examine him. Shinpei's right eye was its mother's lost right eye from the past. It was puzzling how Shinpei had obtained this eye. With this eye, Shinpei would receive the ability to control time. At this moment, Ushio had just woken up, trying to break free from the fake Shinpei's grasp. Of course, it didn't work. Meanwhile, the real Shinpei was writhing in pain on the ground. The shadow leader understood very clearly the mechanism of Shinpei's right eye. Each time he died, he would return to a checkpoint to start over, so there was only one way for the evil side to win. It turned to call the fake Shinpei to begin the work. Ushio fearfully shouted, calling Mio to protect Shinpei. Mio understood what her sister wanted and tried to crawl to Shinpei. But just as she was about to touch Shinpei, the shadow attacked and killed Mio right in front of them. One by one, the shadows gradually dissolved and rejoined the body of the shadow leader. Its final meal was complete. Nagumo lay nursing her wounds, blaming herself for arriving too late. The shadow leader raised its hand to the sky. Immediately, a bright red light appeared above. The thing that the shadow leader called mother was a girl. Immediately, the black streak appeared, spreading throughout the ceremony area. It was like a flood pouring down below the shrine. Anyone standing or touching this black streak would disappear immediately. The entire island had become a meal for the mother of the shadows. She licked her lips once, showing great satisfaction. Shinpei was helpless, not knowing what to do. Nagumo was the same. She blamed herself for being too weak to save anyone. The shadow's ritual was complete. It was too late to fix this mistake. At that moment, Shinpei suddenly shouted loudly, calling Nagumo. He burst into tears, begging Nagumo to shoot him. He would return to the 22nd to fix this mistake. Nagumo only had one bullet left, all or nothing. But with Shinpei shouting this plan so loudly, of course, the shadow leader wouldn't let that happen. It was preparing to absorb Nagumo when Ushio emerged from under the ground. She punched the shadow leader straight in the face, creating the perfect opportunity for Nagumo to pull the trigger. Before that, she still had to remind Shinpei of one thing. If he could really go back, he must say her name in front of her. If he did that, she would certainly help him with all her strength. The gunshot rang out, blowing away Shinpei's head. Before being sent back in time, Shinpei had to enter an observer state as before. Seeing the scene of the island being swallowed by the black shadow made Shinpei unable to bear it anymore. He just wished it would end quickly. At that time, Shinpei and the mother of the shadows locked eyes. And then he was pulled into a different dimension to reverse the past. Ushio's voice rang out again, reminding him to be careful with this power. It wasn't something an ordinary person could control. In the blink of an eye, Shinpei had returned to July 22nd. He collapsed, vomiting violently, then discovered his clothes were soaking wet. Shinpei immediately remembered that at this moment, he had probably just been knocked into the sea by Mio's bicycle and was rescued by her. Returning home, Shinpei took out a notebook to study. The first time he returned, he appeared on the boat. The second time was after getting off the boat, and this was the third time, when he had been knocked into the sea by Mio's bicycle. The starting point of each loop was gradually being pushed forward. Now Shinpei understood what Ushio had told him. This power had limits, and in the next return, it was highly likely that he would be pushed back to an even later time. Shinpei stood up to change his clothes and prepare. In 3 days, it would be the summer festival. He had to find a way to save everyone within 3 days. Because if he had to use his power again, if his starting point was after Mio's group had been killed, then no matter how many times he went back, it wouldn't solve anything. Meanwhile, at the beach, waves washed ashore, bringing Ushio with them. She woke up confused, her eyes welling with tears as she looked around in surprise and bewilderment. In Shinpei's second time travel, the ship docked. As soon as she set foot on the pier, Nagumo was startled to discover that the person standing next to the ship was a shadow. However, she didn't show any reaction to it. Nagumo pulled her luggage up the slope, just as Mio was cycling down, calling out Shinpei's nickname loudly. This made Nagumo a bit curious. She analyzed the Shin in Shinpei, then quickly dismissed the thought. It couldn't be that Shinpei coincidentally took the same boat as her. Nagumo's attention was caught by a funeral notice. On it was clearly written Ushio's name. Nagumo immediately remembered the scene of Shinpei shouting the girl's name, then bumping right into her chest. So she went to the funeral home to investigate further. While walking around scouting, a man recognized her. Masahito smiled brightly, greeting her and complimenting Nagumo on becoming more beautiful. It had been 14 years since they had met. While greeting Masahito, Nagumo also probed him. She had stepped on his shadow and saw no reaction, proving he wasn't a shadow monster. After that, Nagumo curiously asked Masahito about little Ushio. Mentioning this, Masahito's face became sad as he recounted everything to her. But very quickly he changed to another topic. Then he called Mr. Elaine to meet Nagumo. Of course, Nagumo knew him, and Mr. Elaine wasn't a stranger to her either. In middle school, Nagumo had been a regular customer at Mr. Elaine's restaurant. She knew very well about his family. 2 daughters, the younger one Mio, and the elder sister Ushio. After giving birth to Mio, Mr. Elaine's wife had passed away. While he was working, customers would take turns caring for Mio to help him. At that time, Ushio was also very young. When the little girl came to ask Nagumo to read her a story, she happily read to Ushio a newly released novel that she had written herself. After meeting with Mr. Elaine, Nagumo leaned against a corner of the wall, looking at Ushio's memorial photo. 14 years had passed, a very long time. From then until now, no notable deaths had been recorded, but perhaps it was time for them to act. While thinking, Nagumo heard Mr. Elaine's voice. He was receiving a phone call from Mio, reporting that she and Shinpei had fallen into the sea, so they would be late for the funeral. Immediately, Nagumo approached to inquire with Mr. Elaine about this Shinpei boy. He and Masahito cheerfully answered her. Shinpei was the son of a close friend of his from before. 10 years ago, Shinpei's parents had an accident while climbing a boat. Hearing this was enough, Nagumo pulled her suitcase and left, so she had confirmed that the child she needed to find was the person she had met on the boat. But for now, she needed to avoid Shinpei. She couldn't trust him immediately with such little information. Mr. Elaine, seeing Nagumo leave, chased after her. He took Nagumo to a hidden corner, then told her the secret about his daughter's death. The girl had been strangled to death, not drowned as the police had announced. This made Nagumo a bit angry. Were the police on this island idiots? If she had been strangled, surely there would still be blood and skin of the perpetrator under Ushio's fingernails. Without hesitation, Nagumo rushed into the hall, pushing open the lid of Ushio's coffin, surprising everyone. Tetsu, seeing this, tried to stop Nagumo, but it was almost ineffective. Nagumo gently wiped Ushio's neck, and the mark from being strangled immediately appeared. She then turned to ask Mr. Elaine who had dressed Ushio. Mr. Elaine only remembered it was probably a nurse at the hospital. At this moment, the doctor present in the hall rushed over to reproach Nagumo for not respecting the dead. Nagumo didn't bother to argue and immediately pulled her suitcase to leave. Mr. Elaine continuously ran after her, apologizing to Nagumo for telling her this inappropriate matter. Nagumo turned to ask him one more question, whether before dying, Ushio had ever mentioned anything about a doppelganger. As soon as she finished speaking, Nagumo's childhood friend recognized her. Asako burst into tears in front of Nagumo, unable to believe this had happened to Ushio. Just because she saved Asako's daughter, Ushio had to die. Mr. Elaine hurriedly comforted Asako, while Nagumo's face wrinkled up. This third-rate acting couldn't fool her. The Asako before her was a disguised shadow. Most likely, the real Asako had already been killed. Nagumo angrily gritted her teeth. This damn thing dared to come to Mr. Elaine's funeral after causing all that. After leaving the hall, Nagumo went to meet Mr. Nezu and told him the whole truth. Shori's entire family were shadows. Hearing this, Mr. Nezu could already envision the scenario. Surely the real Shori had been killed, pretending to drown to kill Ushio, then replacing Asako's entire family. But to do this, surely among them, there was one who could create new shadows. Things were becoming more complex. At this time, Nagumo, with tears in her eyes, threw him a phone. She hoped that when she needed it, Mr. Nezu would help. Returning to Shinpei, having been reincarnated, Shinpei copied exactly what he had done in the previous reincarnation. This helped him avoid being attacked by Shori right away. The funeral ended at 1 p.m. When everyone had left, Asako's family called Shinpei over to probe how much he knew about the shadow that he had mentioned. Shinpei broke out in a sweat when he saw an ant crawling across their shadow. He remembered clearly what Nagumo had told him. The shadow hated being stepped on its shadow. Surely Asako's entire family were disguised shadows. Shinpei fearfully tried to find an excuse to make Asako's family leave. At this time, Mio approached him to inquire. Right then, Shinpei turned sharply to ask Mio about the color of the underwear she had worn yesterday. In the second loop, he had accidentally seen the color of that underwear when he was killed. This morning, when she came to pick him up, Mio was wearing different underwear. After Mio confirmed that yesterday she had worn white panties, Shinpei was certain Mio had been copied from yesterday. He couldn't reverse time that far. He had to find another way to protect Mio. At 1:30 p.m., Ushio's coffin was taken to the crematorium. Everyone gathered in the dining room for a farewell meal for the girl. Shinpei went around the room asking all the people he found suspicious. The first question was whether they had heard the story about the shadows. The second question was whether they had met anyone with huge breasts. When hearing about this, Mr. Elaine was quite sure the person Shinpei was referring to was Nagumo. So he handed over the paper Nagumo had asked him to give to Shinpei. This was a code, like in the novel Nagumo had written herself, so Shinpei quickly found the answer. Mr. Elaine excused himself to go to the bathroom. Shinpei immediately called to try to contact Nagumo, but the person who answered was Mr. Nezu. He didn't explain much, just told Shinpei to return to the hall and wait for his contact. While Mr. Elaine was in the bathroom, the shadow disguised as Mr. Elaine appeared, sneaking into the bathroom to assassinate him. Just as it opened the door, Nagumo was waiting and immediately hit it with a hammer to the floor. Only after a while did Mr. Nezu contact Shinpei again, calling him to the yard. He asked him to stand like a statue, then fired a shot straight at his shadow. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, after taking a hammer blow, the fake Elaine also went to meet his maker. The real Elaine sat in the next room, not knowing what was happening at all. On Shinpei's side, taking a shot to the shadow while he was unharmed was enough to prove he wasn't a fake. So Mr. Nezu provided Nagumo's location to him. As he went, he wondered why she knew about the shadows. At the gate, Mr. Nezu was already waiting. He led Shinpei inside, explaining the situation earlier as they walked. Finally, Shinpei met Nagumo. Shinpei immediately presented the novel, reading his name very clearly, wanting Nagumo to sign it for him. While signing, Nagumo reminded Shinpei to listen very carefully to what she was about to list. Based on her observation, Shinpei couldn't possibly solve the code without knowing who she was beforehand. There was only one possibility. Either he had known her before, or he had gone through July 22nd several times. This meant Shinpei was a time traveler. Hearing this, Shinpei burst into tears, confirming Nagumo's reasoning. Shinpei handed the novel to Nagumo, curiously asking if she believed in the truth about the shadows, which was why she wrote this novel, and moreover, she had named the main character after herself. Hearing this, Nagumo leaned against the wall and told Shinpei that 14 years ago, She had seen the shadow with her own eyes, and it was also the one who had killed her family. She had experienced it, so she believed Shinpei. As for other issues, she would keep them secret, because if Shinpei was copied by the shadow would also know her secrets. Mr. Nezu now spoke up, reminding Shinpei that the shadow's targets were families. 14 years ago, only Nagumo escaped, so when she returned here, she would certainly become their target. Shinpei immediately realized, first Ushio, then Mio, finally him. So what would happen to Mr. Elaine? Nagumo interrupted his train of thought. Mr. Elaine's problem had already been solved by her. Once a shadow was killed, it couldn't return, so Mr. Elaine would be safe. This effect was similar to antibacterial immunity. Mr. Nezu was also immune to the shadow, so he wasn't afraid at all. Seeing Shinpei still very worried, Nagumo encouraged him, promising to protect him at all costs. Then, regarding Shinpei's plan, he hurriedly told her everything he knew. On the night of the summer festival, everyone would die. The shadow leader had the ability to control other shadows. Just earlier, Shinpei had given Nagumo a piece of paper, which also explained the events that were about to occur. At 9 p.m. tonight, Mio's shadow would appear in front of Mr. Elaine's store. Nagumo understood. Then tonight, she would deal with Mio's shadow. But for now, there was still a matter to handle. Without Nagumo saying it, Shinpei knew she intended to go deal with the shadows in Asako's family. He advised Nagumo not to do so because, according to the previous reincarnation cycle he had seen, when the festival took place, little Shiori was still present there, proving Nagumo had failed in defeating the little girl. But if Nagumo still insisted on going, Shinpei wanted to follow her. If a variable occurred, he wanted to know what reason led to their failure. Nagumo agreed to his request. However, she would go in alone, while Shinpei and Mr. Nezu would hide in a corner to observe. Before entering, Nagumo stood listening to a recording, which made Shinpei somewhat curious. Mr. Nezu let slip an explanation. Nagumo had no memories, so she had to record what she had known for her subsequent actions. Nagumo pulled her suitcase and rang the doorbell at Asako's house. The fake Asako shadow enthusiastically opened the door for Nagumo. Nagumo used the excuse that today's meeting was too hasty, and she hadn't had time to give gifts to the family, so she wanted to come in with everyone. The fake Shiori, hearing this, ordered the fake Asako to let her in. Nagumo entered and asked Asako's permission to open her suitcase here. Just waiting for her to be off guard, Nagumo immediately hit her in the face with a hammer. Outside the Koba store, Shinpei was still wondering, asking Mr. Nezu if it was just a guess. But did Nagumo have multiple personalities? She herself had told him to meet her brother. But such a possibility couldn't happen, right? Mr. Nezu smiled and gently reminded Shinpei, half right, half wrong, soon he would understand. Shinpei was still very worried, not knowing if Nagumo alone could withstand the three of them. On this, Mr. Nezu was certain she could, because he knew Nagumo was a very strong person. She had the secret to destroying the shadows. The reason Nagumo requested Shinpei to stay outside wasn't because she feared he would be in danger, but because he was a variable in her plan, and Nagumo was trying to understand why her plan in the previous loop had failed. Inside the building, Nagumo knocked Asako away. Immediately, Asako's husband grabbed chopsticks and rushed up to attack her. Nagumo hit him on the head and kicked him away. In a moment, Nagumo saw Asako transform and attack her from behind, thanks to which she was able to escape the attack, then took the opportunity to hit right at the shadow under her feet, successfully killing the fake Asako shadow. Now Nagumo sensed a presence behind her. It was little Shiori. She was still pretending to be innocent, calling for her parents, but by now, Nagumo couldn't be fooled like that. With a hammer in her hand, Nagumo struck down at the shadow, but it could dodge and circle around behind her. Outside, Nezu was still explaining more to Shinpei. Nagumo had a twin brother. 14 years ago, her brother had been killed, his body covered in bite marks. Hearing the screams, Mr. Nezu had run over to check. The scene before his eyes had stayed with him until now. Everyone said Nagumo's brother had been attacked by wild animals, but Nagumo insisted the boy had been murdered. The bite marks all over his body had blurred the mark on the boy's neck, and no one believed Nagumo. The boy's funeral was held right after, and then he was taken to the crematorium. Hearing this, Shinpei also vaguely realized it was exactly like how Ushio had died. Seeing that Shinpei understood the problem, Mr. Nezu turned to ask Shinpei once more if he was ready to face what was about to happen. In the building, Nagumo had been subdued by the fake Shiori, who was strangling her on the ground. It was quite surprised by what Nagumo had just done. She knew how to kill a shadow, which made it wonder if she was on the same side as the traitor. Nagumo didn't bother to answer, just reminding it that if it wanted to know, it could copy her. The shadow angrily prepared to kill Nagumo, but she grabbed the chopsticks from the floor and without hesitation, stabbed herself to harm the shadow. It screamed in pain and rushed straight to the 3rd floor. This fake shadow was completely different from the 2 shadows she had just dealt with. To be certain, before going up to the 3rd floor to find it, Nagumo had sent a message outside to inform Shinpei and Mr. Nezu. She would pursue it, and they would switch to Plan B. From his bag, Mr. Nezu immediately pulled out a nail gun, ready and prepared. Meanwhile, Nagumo had gone up to the 3rd floor to probe. She entered a room and immediately sent a message to inform Mr. Nezu to prepare. The shadow would escape through the window. After that, Nagumo spoke up, gently reminding little Shori who was standing behind her. She knew all its secrets. When copying a person, it would have to remain immobile for a short period and couldn't do anything. If it acted like that, it would die immediately. The shadow clicked its tongue, having its weakness pointed out. It wasn't foolish enough to copy Nagumo anymore, and as she had predicted, it had escaped through the window. Mr. Nezu was already waiting below. With the nail gun, he fired continuously at it, but it wasn't effective. This shadow moved too quickly. But right at this moment, from a hidden corner, Shinpei had jumped out to pin the shadow to the ground. It angrily bit Shinpei's hand, but he still wouldn't let go, having to wait until Mr. Nezu came and shot the nail gun into its leg before Shinpei released it. According to his experience, to hold a shadow, they needed to shoot at 3 different points. That way, it wouldn't be able to move anymore. Now this shadow was useless. At this moment, the fake shadow suddenly burst into laughter. It lamented how boring it was, that this summer everything would end anyway. Shinpei angrily shouted, wanting to know why it had killed Ushio. The shadow remained calm, teasing Shinpei, and even invited him to become a shadow with it. Shinpei was very angry. He raised his fist, wanting to hit it, but looking at little Shori's face, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Boom, Nagumo's hammer had sent it to the counter. That's enough, she reminded Shinpei. Talking to a shadow for too long would make Shinpei confuse it with others. After calming down, Shinpei curiously asked Nagumo what the difference was between a real person and a copy. There must be some real difference, right? So that evening, they all met by the river. Here, they also explained to Shinpei about Nagumo's multiple personality disorder. Nagumo was the older sister, and the person introducing himself to Shinpei was the younger brother named Hizuru. The two lived in the same body, switching places when necessary. Taking advantage of being outside to chat, Hizuru immediately badmouthed his sister, but suddenly a fist flew straight into his face. Nagumo regained control of the body. She was very embarrassed that her brother had spoken ill of her like that. After that, she gently reminded Shinpei they didn't have time to study the differences between shadows and normal people, at least until everything was over. It was too late to save the Koba family, but it wasn't too late for Shinpei. He could still save little Mio if he killed her fake shadow. After that, they all went to the front of the restaurant to prepare to implement the plan. Shinpei's task was very simple. Observe and make everything similar to the previous reincarnation. She and Mr. Nezu would be ready, waiting for his signal. After planning, Shinpei entered the house. He was startled when he saw Mio holding a knife, thinking she was about to stab him. But no, Mio just wanted to cook a meal for Shinpei by herself. Shinpei quickly ran over to stand beside her, pretending to want to help the little girl, but in fact stepping on Mio's shadow to confirm Mio wasn't a fake shadow, which made Shinpei sigh with relief. He immediately sent Mio elsewhere, saying he would cook. He had to keep everything exactly as in the second reversal, otherwise, the actions of others would also change, leading to alerting the shadow, which would be disastrous. The sound of a rumbling stomach made Shinpei think Mio was already hungry. He turned to check, but somehow it was Ushio, and she was even wearing a swimsuit. Shinpei was startled and fell to the ground. He kept asking Ushio why she appeared here. She should have appeared on the 24th, not now. Seeing this, Ushio didn't hide anything from Shinpei. She came to inform Shinpei that on the 24th at the summer festival, black shadow monsters would appear and kill everyone. Shinpei stared at Ushio with wide eyes. She knew about this. Could it be that Ushio had experienced the night of the 24th? Just then, there was a sound at the door. It was Mio. The little girl had just finished washing her face and had returned. To avoid being discovered by Mio, Ushio had to hide under the table, while Shinpei pretended to continue cooking. Ushio's stomach rumbled with hunger, making Shinpei break out in a sweat. But fortunately, Mio thought it was Shinpei's stomach. She sat down and sighed deeply. Shinpei still knew how to be hungry, which meant he was still healthy. Shinpei, with a knife in his hand, kept telling himself to stay calm. But at a time like this, remembering the curry recipe was the easiest thing. But the situation wasn't good at all. Ushio's appearance here was completely different from the previous 2-time reversals. Variables would definitely appear. What should he do now? Nagumo, help! Shinpei worried. At this time, Uncle Elaine had just returned. Seeing Shinpei cooking while his daughter was just sitting around, he had asked Mio to help. But Mio immediately refused, using the excuse that her only job was to eat. Shinpei had taken advantage of this opportunity to give Ushio a note reminding her that in 5 minutes, Uncle Elaine would go wash his hands, and Mio would go take a bath. At that time, Ushio must rush up to his room to hide. Just a moment later, Shinpei had completed the curry. He took out plates, preparing to carry them up to the room when Mio spoke up. Wondering why there were 2 portions, Shinpei, scared and sweating, quickly used the excuse that he was super hungry to fool the little girl. He carried the curry tray upstairs. Just as he opened the door, he already saw Ushio in a ready-to-eat position. At this moment, Shinpei remembered Nagumo's instruction not to let the shadow's words touch him. This made Shinpei somewhat suspicious. Why would Ushio's shadow appear here like this? While eating, Shinpei had probed Ushio with a few things. He even had a knife tucked behind his back in case of trouble. Ushio also didn't remember where she came from. She only remembered waking up at the shore. Of course, Ushio wouldn't let anyone discover her, except for Shinpei alone. Suddenly, Shinpei tickled Ushio, startling her. She turned sharply to reproach him. Shinpei explained while slowly taking out the knife from behind his back. Currently, Ushio's shadow had no defense at all. He could completely kill it right now, but in the second reversal, this shadow had created an opportunity to help Shinpei start over. Was it right for him to do this? At this moment, Shinpei remembered when he was about to leave for Tokyo to study. Uncle Elaine knew someone there, and Shinpei had decided to go to Tokyo to learn cooking. He used the excuse that he couldn't always be a burden to Ushio's family. But the truth was that Shinpei acted this way because he liked Ushio. He didn't want to always be Ushio's brother. On the last day before Shinpei was about to leave, Ushio had wished to eat the curry he cooked, but Shinpei had refused. And then there was no next time here anymore. Ushio ate and cried. It was good that she still had the chance to eat Shinpei's curry one more time. Now Shinpei had confirmed it. The person in front of him, even if a shadow, was still Ushio. It was different from other shadows. So Shinpei wasn't careful anymore and shared everything with Ushio. On the upcoming 24th, the festival would be attacked by shadow monsters. Hearing this, Ushio wanted to help Shinpei, but when he mentioned the abilities of a shadow, Ushio gave up. She couldn't do the same as them. Outside the coffin store, Nagumo and Mr. Nezu were already in position. In just 10 more minutes, Mio's fake shadow would appear here. She called to ask about Mr. Nezu's situation. He also had a gun ready, lying in a perfect position waiting for the opportunity. However, he still had something to remind Nagumo. Don't trust too much in what Shinpei said. After all, to him, Shinpei was just bait to lure those shadows to appear. If a variable occurred, Shinpei might not be helpful. Inside Shinpei's room, he had advised Ushio to change out of her swimsuit. Ushio wanted to, but she didn't know how to use the shadow's abilities. Trying too hard even made the swimsuit on her body disappear completely, exposing her naked body. So Shinpei had to lend her a shirt to wear temporarily. The two were chattering with each other without realizing that the shadow had sneaked in through the pipe and infiltrated the house. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Shinpei hurriedly pushed Ushio to hide under the blanket, then opened the door to welcome Mio. The little girl came to clean up the food to wash, but there were 2 sets of eating utensils here, making Mio a bit curious. This startled Shinpei, who hurriedly explained. After Mio left, he dared to let Ushio come out. Somehow, once more, Mio opened the door. But this time Shinpei had already noticed something strange. Mio, with a knife in her hand, rushed straight to stab him, but Ushio had jumped to take a knife blow for Shinpei. Then she kicked the fake shadow away. The fake shadow continued to attack. This time, it aimed at Ushio first. With the knife in its hand, it stabbed straight down at Ushio's entity, cutting off her arm. Shinpei was scared, not knowing what to do. He was no match for this shadow, but should they just die like this? Shinpei opened the curtain behind him, took out a knife, and faced the fake Mio. It didn't attack him immediately but turned to question Ushio. If they were on the same side, why was Ushio helping Shinpei? Ushio angrily shouted, denying being on the same side as it. She and Shinpei were a family. Protecting him was natural. Just as the shadow rushed to attack Shinpei, gunshots rang out, blowing off the fake Mio's head, creating an opportunity for Shinpei to stab straight into its entity and finish it off. After that, he hurriedly turned to check Ushio's wounds. Just then, Nagumo had pushed the door open. Without a word, she had already intended to take her hammer to kill Ushio. Shinpei had to kneel down and beg Nagumo to save her. Ushio had saved him twice. She wasn't a shadow but a real Ushio. This made Nagumo very angry, daring to ask her to save a shadow. She threatened Shinpei that if he really stood on this shadow's side, she wouldn't hesitate to kill him too. Shinpei didn't care. If Nagumo did that, he would just continue to reverse time. At this moment, Ushio weakly got up. asking about the real Mio's situation. This, Nagumo had already confirmed. The little girl was safe and in the bathroom. More importantly, Ushio's voice was identical to the recorded message sent to Nagumo asking for help. So Nagumo withdrew her hammer and treated Ushio's wounds. After that, she played the recording for Ushio to listen. It was indeed her voice, but Ushio couldn't remember anything. At this time, Mr. Nezu arrived. He put aside the past of Ushio and Nagumo. More important now was that what Shinpei had known had changed. Mio's shadow was no longer standing in front of the house, but had entered the house to kill Shinpei. Very possibly, it was because they had killed Shiori's shadow, leading to their actions being so different. Although they very much wanted to continue helping Shinpei, he and Nagumo were forced to decline. If Shinpei still insisted on not killing Ushio's shadow, Nagumo had confirmed that currently, Ushio was harmless. But who knew what the future would hold? Shinpei had to accept that. Before leaving, he had also gently reminded Nagumo that on the afternoon of tomorrow, July 23rd, Nagumo would likely be killed by the shadow. He reminded her in advance so that she could be careful and change the future. The next morning, Shinpei woke up very early. He went straight to Mio's room to wake her, so she would confirm she was already up and wouldn't need to come to his room to call him. At this time, Mio gave the shell necklace to Shinpei. He took it back to his room and gave it to Ushio. This was the original. Hopefully, Ushio would remember something. Shinpei reminded Ushio to stay in the room, while he would go to work since today their restaurant would be open all day. After a while, Sue had also arrived. He and Sue went out to the beach. Just as Sue was about to tell the mysterious cause leading to Ushio's death, she appeared right in front of Sue, freezing him. After that, Shinpei explained everything to Sue. He cried uncontrollably, blaming himself. If that day he had tried a little harder, perhaps Ushio wouldn't have had to die. Ushio angrily punched Sue in the face. Currently, they were having to rely on Sue, yet Sue was planning to lie there crying until when? After Sue calmed down, Shinpei handed the phone to Ushio. He didn't know the password and had to ask the owner to open it. With her fingerprint, Ushio successfully opened the phone. They all checked everything in it, and they discovered a video of the beach, the place where Ushio would lose her life. Ushio played the video for everyone to watch. In the video, Ushio appeared standing happily in front of the beach. She had recorded this video to leave a message for Shinpei. By the time he watched this video, she would already be dead. Right after that, Ushio pulled her shadow out to stand next to Shinpei and Sue, who were very surprised. Standing in front of the camera, Ushio confirmed to Shinpei that she had verified this Ushio shadow was not like other shadows. She appeared here to help Shinpei as an ally of his, so she hoped Shinpei would treat that shadow well. As for the original Ushio, she knew she was about to die, so she had a few words for Shinpei, which was why she recorded this video. Everything had started with little Shiori. On July 17th, Ushio had met little Shiori. The girl had told Ushio about the shadow story with a very serious face. Shiori had felt someone exactly like herself following her and affirmed to Ushio that this was not simple. At first, Ushio had joked around and didn't believe it, until the next day, July 18th, when she and Mio were cleaning up by the beach for community service, and Ushio had seen someone who looked exactly like herself with her own eyes. When Ushio chased after it to look, she couldn't find it anywhere. Now Ushio believed in the shadow story, so she went back to meet little Shiori, promising that she would help Shiori learn about that shadow story. This made Shiori very happy. Very quickly, the beach cleanup ended. The summer festival would be held on the upcoming July 24th. After finishing here, Ushio and Mio returned home, playing rock paper scissors to see who would bathe first. Mio won and suddenly mentioned Shinpei, wondering if he would return home this summer. Hearing about Shinpei made Ushio furious, but Mio knew very well that her sister liked him, so she kept teasing, making Ushio very embarrassed. After Mio finished bathing, it was Ushio's turn. She took off her clothes and stepped into the bathroom. Somehow there was someone who looked exactly like herself sitting in there. Ushio was so scared she was about to scream loudly for Mio, but the Ushio shadow covered her mouth to stop her. Ushio struggled and pushed the shadow into the bathtub. The shadow rubbed her head and lamented that at least Ushio should listen to her explanation first. Ushio worriedly questioned the shadow about why it appeared here. The shadow calmly replied that she was Ushio, so returning home wasn't wrong. The shadow's actions being exactly like her own made Ushio somewhat afraid. But very quickly, the two of them were in tune with each other, and they immediately thought about little Shiori's problem. Ushio had confirmed that the shadow existed, so certainly what Shiori had told her was true. Certainly, Shiori's shadow was just lurking somewhere on this island. According to what the little girl had said, Shiori first saw her shadow on Takanasu Mountain, so they decided they had to find out what was going on. But first, they needed to take a bath. After that, they went up to Takanasu Mountain together. The shadow kept following Ushio, making her somewhat uncomfortable, while for the shadow, it was Ushio who was following it. Ushio, with a piece of wood in her hand, turned to threaten the shadow. Beware of doing anything mysterious, she would kill it immediately. The two of them fumbled around the mountain for a long time, but still couldn't discover anything unusual. It was already very late today. Just as Ushio was about to give up and go home, the shadow spoke up, pointing Ushio to another path. In front of the path was a warning sign of danger, which increased their curiosity. So the two girls continued deeper inside. Following the path, they found an old house. They immediately recognized this was an old clinic of Sue's family. It was rumored to be haunted, so Sue's family had moved out long ago. Because of this rumor, no one on the island dared to come near this area. Ushio and the shadow began to probe the area. Although very afraid of ghosts, the shadow had a feeling as if she had been here before. Just then, a strange sound rang out. Ushio looked and broke out in a sweat when the thing that appeared before her was indeed a shadow. It had copied Ushio's appearance and rushed up to attack. Fortunately, the shadow had jumped to push Ushio aside, and then it was pinned against a tree trunk by the shadow monster. Ushio with a stick tried to hit the monster's head, but it had no effect. Then in the next swing, she accidentally missed, hitting right at the shadow under its feet. It painfully turned around and kicked Ushio in the stomach, then wrapped around a tree branch and stabbed straight into Ushio's shadow's entity. Ushio's shadow screamed in pain. This pain confused it because its body wasn't injured, but very quickly, Ushio's shadow realized the problem. It wasn't a real person, but just a copied shadow of Ushio. With the weakness of the shadows in hand, it completely dominated the other shadow monster, then killed it in just one beat. This super cool action also surprised the real Ushio. After that, it told Ushio everything. For a shadow to exist, it needed to kill the original. Normally, it would have killed Ushio already, but there was something very strange here. Ushio also understood the issue. If that was the case, then little Shiori was in danger. They needed to do something right away. The next day, July 20th, they decided to go to the beach to record this video. Standing in front of the camera, Ushio's shadow kept wondering if Shinpei would think she was a monster when he met her. But Ushio's next sentence made it burst into tears. It didn't matter who, all were just Ushio. Saying this, Ushio's shadow remembered all of its memories. Not just memories, but power and data had all returned. Now it was time to show Shinpei and Sue the entire vision of what happened on July 21st. Ushio held out her hand in front of Shinpei and Sue. Just touching it once, they were all transported back to that day. When Mio's group was preparing to swim in the sea, Sue wanted to warn them, but Shinpei held his hand back. This was just a playback video of the past, so they couldn't affect the people standing there. After that, Ushio led them to meet herself on that day. The two were standing in a corner discussing plans. Ushio's shadow had transformed into the necklace around Ushio's neck, while the real necklace had been stored away. Shiori at this time was still very lively, wanting Sister Mio to teach her how to swim. But in just a moment, the girl had disappeared. Sue quickly discovered bubbles rising up. Ushio's shadow had warned her that Shiori was underwater. So Ushio rushed quickly to save the girl. Although Mio and Sue wanted to help, Ushio firmly stopped them. The shadow was trying to drown and kill Shiori down here. Ushio swam very quickly down. Then her shadow also appeared, rushing to cut off fake Shiori's arm, then hugging little Shiori to bring her to shore. Of course, the shadow wouldn't let them do that so easily. It had chased after and wrapped tightly around Ushio's shadow. The real Ushio at this time didn't hesitate to restrain it, shouting loudly for her shadow to take Shiori away. Then she herself sank slowly under the sea. Ushio's shadow was crying while trying to bring little Shiori ashore. Just as they were about to arrive, the shadow monster appeared again. With all her last strength, Ushio had fought back, but still failed and sank into the sea with the real Ushio. Little Shiori had also been killed by the shadow. Sue and Mio had now dived down to rescue, but what they rescued was Shiori's shadow. Watching this, Ushio burst into tears, apologizing for not being able to protect little Shiori. She promised the real Ushio that she would protect everyone at the summer festival with Shinpei. Sue, with tears in his eyes, gritted his teeth in hatred for these monsters. He swore he would kill all of them to avenge Ushio. Seeing Shinpei not saying anything, Sue angrily turned to scold Shinpei, but the truth wasn't like that. Shinpei was also very angry, just wishing he could kill them right now. Suddenly, from behind, a hand reached out to grab Shinpei's hand. He dumbfoundedly asked Ushio if this wasn't in the video, right? A video playback couldn't touch his body. The shadow now transformed its shape, making everyone fearful and quickly turning off this video. Fortunately, they were able to safely return. But that was safe for Ushio and Sue only. For Shinpei, it wasn't like that, as a strange black mark appeared on his hand. This was the handprint of the thing that had just held him. Sue worriedly questioned Shinpei. Currently, there was nothing different other than this. Shinpei didn't feel any pain at all. However, at the moment the shadow grabbed his hand, its face had transformed. Shinpei immediately remembered that face was the last one before he reversed time for the third time. That girl had appeared at the summer festival? Ushio now also began to feel strange. Just earlier, she had clearly seen that shadow kill her. But somehow Ushio could still return perfectly. But thanks to that, Ushio could tell Shinpei the truth. At this time, it suddenly started pouring rain. Sue had planned to return home, but Shinpei wanted to go to the old clinic right now. They didn't have time anymore. Of course, Sue would still go with Shinpei. How could he abandon his friend like that? Meanwhile, Mio and Takiko were taking shelter from the rain at a bus stop. Takiko mentioned the summer festival, probing Mio to see if she intended to participate. Mio didn't want to think about that right now at all. Seeing Takiko looking a bit sad, Mio hurriedly explained it was because she didn't have a yukata to wear. Takiko's eyes lit up. About that, Mio didn't need to worry. She would prepare one for Mio. Then she held Mio's hand, asking the little girl to come to the ceremony with her. Just then, a large man also ran in here to shelter from the rain and greeted them. Mio cheerfully greeted him back, but Takiko was very suspicious and immediately asked about his identity. From his pocket, he pulled out a card, introducing himself as Miura from the Northern Station. Having met people here, he wanted to ask them about the Koba supermarket situation. Meanwhile, Shinpei had already gone up to the forest. Sue had also just arrived. Looking at the outfit Sue was wearing, equipped with armor to the teeth, made Shinpei a bit surprised. Sue shouted, reproaching Shinpei for going alone. And where was Ushio? Of course, Ushio was always right next to Shinpei. But she had transformed into a necklace to go along for convenience. They all went to the old clinic together. On the way, Shinpei wondered about this clinic with Sue. Sue also told him a secret. In 4th grade, he had come here once with brother Tetsu to test their courage but couldn't get in, as they were caught on the spot by Sue's father. Sue himself also felt strange. There was something about this clinic that his father was hiding. But what was it after all? They had arrived in front of the clinic. Shinpei immediately asked Ushio if there were any shadows around. Her memories had returned along with her powers, so Ushio could definitely detect them. Ushio jumped out of the necklace. Looking at the swimsuit she was wearing, Sue angrily reproached Ushio for doing business, not going to play. Looking at who was wearing armor and still blaming her, Ushio cursed right back at Sue, using the excuse that this was her battle outfit. Sue, being yelled at, was so scared he quickly ran to tell on her to Shinpei. So Shinpei had to explain to his friend. Ushio's real body was lying under the ground, so whatever she wore was the same. Moreover, Ushio had chosen this swimsuit to save copying space for other things. Shinpei and the group entered the old house. Everything here was very old. According to Sue, this place had been built 100 years ago and was abandoned in the 60s. The stairs were all broken, so they couldn't go up to the 2nd floor. So Shinpei had to ask Ushio to use her power to go up there. He and Sue continued to scout the 1st floor. Sue had found a medicine cabinet, while Shinpei noticed some papers on the floor. He bent down to pick them up and check. These were patient files and the diseases they had contracted. At this time, Sue's call came. His face was a bit pale as he pointed Shinpei toward a statue. It looked a bit creepy, and they didn't know what it was. Sue tried to recall what this was. It seemed to be a statue of the fishing god Ibisu. Shinpei immediately Googled for more information, as he didn't think this statue looked like Ibisu at all. The information there startled Shinpei. The first god who created all the gods was Haruko. The descriptive information completely matched this statue, but Shinpei still found it puzzling. A strange god with such a horrific appearance, why would it be worshipped? Upstairs, Ushio was also diligently investigating. She found an old album of Sue's family. While examining it, Shinpei called her down. He saw a rather large gap in the wall, so Shinpei asked Ushio to go inside to investigate. Ushio was somewhat dissatisfied. She didn't like doing this at all. But when Shinpei promised to treat her to takoyaki, she happily agreed right away. It was too dark inside. Ushio couldn't see clearly. Suddenly, she remembered her ability. Ushio used her copying skill on something randomly to create a ray of light to illuminate inside. Thanks to this, Ushio discovered that this wall seemed to be a door. Inside was another door, and a key was needed to open it. So Sue began his work, using the baseball bat he brought to start hitting the wall. However, the wall was too hard, forcing them to have a key to open it. Ushio started complaining that she was too hungry to search anymore. Shinpei immediately presented her with a rice ball that he had prepared in advance. Ushio happily ate until her stomach was full, sitting comfortably. Looking at this scene, Shinpei suddenly realized that the statue's belly behind was also abnormally large, as if pregnant. Ushio immediately stood up. With the shadow's skill, she could scan anything inside the statue. Indeed, Shinpei had guessed correctly. Inside the statue was a key. Ushio immediately used her power to perfectly copy this key. She opened the door for everyone. Inside the door was a hidden path leading underground. As soon as the door opened, Ushio sensed the aura of a shadow and warned everyone. Su broke out in a sweat. A door that could only be opened with the help of a shadow. What was his father hiding here? Shinpei was also a bit scared, but he still decided to go down to investigate. Su had heard that during the war, many underground channels were dug by the residents. It seemed this was one of them, a perfect place for shadows to hide. Ushio now called Shinpei and pointed to the distance. She sensed a mysterious stream of energy there, and she didn't like this atmosphere at all. Shinpei immediately pulled out a nail gun from his bag. Before going, he assigned tasks carefully to each person. If things went bad, Su had to protect Ushio at all costs. As for Shinpei, he had the ability to reverse time, so they didn't need to worry. Shinpei had considered all possibilities. He could die and start over, but for Ushio, there was no certainty they would meet her again. After planning, the group moved forward. Very quickly, Shinpei discovered a black streak on the ground. Ushio came over to check. This was the remains of people eaten by the shadow. But it had been a very long time ago. A rat running by startled Su. Ushio also broke out in a sweat. She discovered the aura of a shadow where the rat had run in. Ushio wanted to go ahead to check, but was held back by Shinpei. This was his job. Shinpei gently moved forward. He looked in and indeed saw a shadow. It was eating rats, but didn't seem to have discovered them. Ushio and Su also quickly got into position. With the nail gun in hand, Shinpei took a deep breath to calm down, repeatedly chanting a mantra in his head. 3 shots were enough to hold this shadow, then Ushio would be the one to finish it off. To be sure, he also threw a stone in to check. But the shadow didn't react at all, proving it hadn't discovered them yet. Shinpei very gently moved closer to it, but just as he got close, this shadow had the ability to smell and detected Shinpei. It transformed and ran away in front of him, only waiting for Su to swing the baseball bat to hit it. It didn't work. It merged into the baseball bat and rushed to attack Su. Shinpei worriedly chased after the shadow, which had already pinned Su to the ground. Shinpei was sweating in fear. He wanted to attack badly, but if he shot now, Su would also be hit. Not knowing what to do, a voice in his head reminded Shinpei. At times like this, he had to stay calm, and then Shinpei saw the problem. He shot straight at the monster, 3 shots on target, and it was pinned in place. Su immediately pushed it away for Ushio to deliver the finishing blow. Fortunately, because Su had worn armor beforehand, he wasn't injured by the nails Shinpei shot. It was still too early to rejoice. Ushio ran over, pointing Shinpei to the intersection. She had sensed an extremely powerful aura there. Shinpei didn't hesitate and moved forward, while Su was still somewhat hesitant because he had just escaped death. Ushio angrily reproached Su. If they wanted to save Mio, they had to do this. Otherwise, the vision of tomorrow where everyone was massacred would happen again. After saying this, she kicked Su straight forward. As they walked, Su wondered why they didn't use Ushio's power to create another nail gun for him. Shinpei had tried, but it didn't work. Any objects that needed energy to operate required the real object to be deleted before they could be used. A gunshot rang out, startling everyone. Su had found a way out. Inside was a natural cave. The group moved forward to scout, and right then, Ushio shouted loudly to warn everyone. Somehow, they had already been surrounded by shadows. From the darkness, bizarre shadow monsters crawled out. Seeing this number, Shinpei's face turned pale with fear, and he hurriedly ordered Ushio to run immediately. Nagumo and Mr. Nezu are currently standing in front of the Koba supermarket. A heavy rain is pouring down, contrary to Nagumo's prediction. She stares intently at the drain in front of the store. An ominous feeling comes over her, but Nagumo still decides to go down there to check, hoping this time it will go smoothly. Meanwhile, Shinpei's group is running away from the shadows as fast as they can. All the shadows are targeting only Ushio and attacking her, ignoring Su and Shinpei completely. Ushio is trying her best to defeat them. However, the wound on Ushio's arm is now throbbing with pain. Blood begins to flow, making Shinpei worried as he runs to help Ushio. Of course, the shadows don't give them time to rest. They continue to approach, when Su pulls out a gas canister from somewhere. He sprays it directly at the shadows, successfully blocking their advance. Ushio now slowly stands up. Su wants to go back, but Ushio doesn't. She can still continue fighting. She is determined to eliminate all these monsters. Shinpei agrees immediately. He assigns Su the task of clearing the way, while he and Ushio will support from behind. Nagumo and Mr. Nezu are running through the underground pipe. Suddenly, she turns sharply and fires a shotgun to eliminate a shadow. Mr. Nezu angrily shouts, reproaching her. If she wanted to shoot, she should at least have warned him first. Shooting at such close range would make him deaf. That said, Mr. Nezu had never expected that the shadow monsters would be hiding under underground pipes like this. With her judgment ability, Nagumo feels very clearly they are very close to their nest now. At Shinpei's house, Mio has been trying to call, but Shinpei doesn't answer, making Mio very worried. She knows he went with Sue, but Sue can't be contacted either. The shadow sickness has taken away Mio's sister. If Shinpei also meets with misfortune, Mio doesn't know how to live. Suddenly, a strange sound rings out. Mio runs out to the road to check and discovers little Shori's hair tie right away. On the right, a voice calls Mio. If she wants to find Shinpei, she should follow it. Then it turns sharply and runs away. Mio immediately chases after it when Tetsu rides his bicycle out from the alley, almost hitting Mio. Mio hurriedly tells Tetsu everything, but he had just come from that road and hadn't seen little Shori at all. Mio doesn't believe it and steps forward to check. Flickering under the dim streetlight, little Shori's figure points straight down the sewer, making Mio and Tetsu break out in a sweat. In the blink of an eye, the little girl has disappeared, leaving the open manhole cover, as if inviting Mio down there. Mio turns to look at Tetsu, and before she can say anything, he has already refused. He uses the excuse that he still has to meet his girlfriend, and moreover, there's no way an elementary school girl would be in the sewer. Mio doesn't stop him. She just sighs deeply and advises Tetsu. If he doesn't want to go, that's fine, but he should try thinking about it. If Tetsu could find little Shori, he would become a hero overnight. Tomorrow morning, news articles about the hero who saved the missing person would be all the rage on this island. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Before she even finished speaking, Tetsu had already been persuaded by Mio. He even took the lead to scout ahead from Mio. Shinpei's group has now gone very deep into the cave. Not seeing the shadows chasing anymore, they dare to stop and catch their breath. Shinpei begins to look around. How could there be coral and seaweed in this cave? These things can't live on shore. Ushio, with a worried face and sweating, gently reminds everyone that all that coral and seaweed are all shadows. It seems someone has copied the sea and placed it right here. Shinpei steps forward to taste the seawater. It's very salty, as if it's real sea. So he guesses this cave will lead to some location out in the sea. Shinpei very much wants to go, but Sue stops him. It's too dangerous for them to proceed. Sue has already used up all the gas he brought. Just then, they see Ushio sitting down, looking very painful. Shinpei immediately realizes that Ushio's arm is still injured. If Shinpei has already discovered it, then Ushio doesn't hide it anymore. Her arm still hasn't completely healed. To restore it to the original state, Ushio needs to copy data from the original. But the problem is that the real Ushio is already dead. In other words, this wound cannot be restored anymore. To end the pain, Ushio directly deletes her right arm. Shinpei watches but can't do anything. He begins to blame himself for not protecting Ushio, then remembers the choice to reverse time to help her. Just then, a voice rings out, asking Shinpei and Sue not to act rashly, or it will kill Ushio immediately. Sue looks and breaks out in a sweat. How could Takiko be down here, and even bringing two shadow monsters with her? Nagumo and Mr. Nezu have reached a dead end. The path has been blocked by a very thick iron gate. Nagumo confirms that inside is the monster's lair, but currently, they don't have tools to cut the iron gate. So she wants to go back to find another way, or get tools to cut this iron gate. Mr. Nezu refuses immediately. According to him, this is the only path leading to their lair. The other paths, he affirms, are not for humans to enter. After that, he tells Nagumo a story he heard as a child, that beneath this island is a huge cave. He only thought it was a legend. Who would have thought it was true like this? They were about to go back to find tools to cut the iron gate when suddenly Nagumo hears a sound. It's Mio and Tetsu wandering down here. As they walk, Tetsu keeps complaining that this sewer stinks too much, until they see the figure of little Shori. Tetsu is too scared to continue, but Mio is much tougher. She immediately chases after. Everything has been seen by Nagumo and Mr. Nezu. Shori's shadow has led Mio and Tetsu along a different path. Mr. Nezu doesn't want to enter that path because he knows there are traps inside. Of course, Nagumo still insists on going. Meanwhile, Shinpei's group is now staring blankly at Takiko. When asked why she appears here, Takiko laughs out loud and thanks Shinpei for bringing Ushio to this place. Her job is to capture the defective merchandise. As she speaks, Takiko approaches them. Shinpei has grabbed the nail gun, shooting straight at Takiko's shadow. But she is not harmed at all, simply because Takiko is not a shadow but a human. Takiko bends down in front of Shinpei, smiling, advising Shinpei that it's best to talk with her for a while first. The two giant shadows standing beside Takiko are ready to attack him at any time. Knowing there's no chance of winning, Shinpei has to throw away the nail gun and surrender to Takiko. After that, Takiko orders the shadow to take Ushio away. Sue shouts, wanting to stop it, but Shinpei has stopped him. According to what Takiko is doing, she came here just to capture Ushio, with no intention of killing them. After that, Shinpei looks up and questions Takiko. After all, why would a human do these things? Will Takiko bring Ushio to her father? Sue jumps in surprise when he hears these things. Seeing the secret has been exposed, Takiko also feels this is a good opportunity to tell Sue the whole truth. Sue is not her father's choice. To understand better, she asks Sue and Shinpei to follow her. Nezu and Nagumo have now reached inside the cave, shooting the shadows while paying attention to their surroundings. They have lost track of Mio. At that moment, Mr. Nezu is extremely surprised to meet Shiori's shadow again. They had clearly killed it, so how is it still alive like this? Nagumo has known about this before. When she swung the hammer to finish it, it had sneaked through the cracks to escape underground. Thanks to that, Nagumo could guess that their lair lies beneath these underground sewers. As declared before, the next time they meet, it will kill Nagumo. As soon as it finishes speaking, the shadow leader appears behind it. Immediately, Shiori's shadow uses its copying skill. Nagumo has fired her gun, but the shadow leader blocks it. So Shiori's shadow has read all of Nagumo's memories. It even knows all of Nagumo's secrets and turns to remind the shadow leader that Nagumo can see 2 seconds ahead of what's about to happen. This is not an opponent they can fight. Mr. Nezu only has time to shout for Nagumo to run, then is shot directly in the chest by the shadow leader with a shotgun and dies instantly. Nagumo is hiding behind the rocks while looking for an escape route, but even so, she still takes a bullet. The shadow leader doesn't chase after her because it knows it has shot a vital point on the human body. Just let Nagumo die slowly. Shinpei is now following Takiko. Ushio already knows what Shinpei's plan is. He hasn't returned to the loop because he wants to know exactly what's happening on this island. The entire cave shakes violently. Takiko turns to explain to Shinpei that this is Haruko being hungry. The time for her meal is approaching. Before taking them inside to meet, Takiko has asked Shinpei for one thing. She hopes Shinpei won't tell this to Mio. Shinpei agrees right away. He never intended to involve Mio in this. They have arrived. Inside the cave is a white-haired girl. Shinpei immediately recognizes that she is the last person he met in the second loop. Takiko stands up to introduce them. This is Haruko, the god of this island, also the mother of the shadows. The form they are seeing is the first form that Haruko copied when she came to this island. This person's name is Hain, but recently, that body has been weakening, and Haruko needs a new body. Just as she finishes speaking, Haruko begins to change shape. Somehow she transforms into little Shiori. In just a moment, Shinpei has understood the whole issue. This is the one who killed Ushio, killed Mio, and swallowed the entire island. A monster like this dares to call itself a god. Don't joke around, Shinpei shouts. Immediately, Haruko becomes angry, extending shadows to kill Shinpei. Fortunately, Takiko speaks up to save him. Haruko narrows her eyes, threatening Shinpei to shut up if he wants to live. At this time, the nurse from Sue's family clinic, Nagoro, appears, bringing 2 coffins. From there, Takiko also gradually explains to everyone. Every year, the island has an average of about 4 deaths. The bodies of those people will be brought here for Haruko to eat. This action has been going on for a very long time, even before the time of Sue's great-grandfather. Sue listens and can't believe it. After all, what does that Haruko woman want to do with these bodies? Seeing the meal has been presented before her, Haruko pulls out the Roman 4 and crawls over, laughing loudly. Takiko just gently turns to remind Shinpei. As she said before, Shinpei doesn't have the ability to kill people, but she has mentally prepared for Shinpei to kill. At this moment, Haruko has opened the coffin lid. Inside is Ushio's body. She laughs loudly and taunts Shinpei. This is Ushio's body that she hadn't finished eating a few days ago. Shinpei shouts loudly in disbelief. Then whose ashes did they receive at the funeral? About that, Sue's father had replaced it with another body. A body printed from Haruko's copying ability. Sue kneels down, unable to accept this. His father and sister are desecrating the dead, just to nurture that self-proclaimed god. Sue shouts loudly, wanting to see his father to question him. Takiko also can't bear it anymore. She curses Sue to his face that it's because of Sue that she has to bear all these things. If they don't take care of Haruko anymore, their mother will have to die. Takiko also tells Sue the whole truth. Their mother has a serious illness that is beyond cure, so their father asked Haruko to create her shadow. If Haruko dies now, their mother will also disappear. Haruko is quite sure Shinpei will understand this feeling, because Shinpei has already regarded Ushio's shadow as the real entity. Meanwhile, Haruko is enjoying her meal. It's Ushio's turn now. Shinpei grits his teeth, unable to accept it eating Ushio's body like that. In the moment when the shadow scans an object, it will be immobilized, and this will be his opportunity. Shinpei shouts, asking Ushio to act. Ushio has just been waiting for this command. She uses her skill to immediately create a copy of the nail gun for Shinpei. He fires nails wildly at the shadow holding Ushio. Thanks to this, she escapes and reclaims Ushio's body. This action of Shinpei makes Takiko very confused. Why is Shinpei trying to fight against a shadow? Doing so, he will die. How can Shinpei defeat a shadow? At this moment, Ushio speaks up, reproaching Takiko. The Takiko she knows would never do things like this. Does Takiko have to always be a servant for something that isn't human? Ushio angrily shouts not to underestimate humans. This makes Haruko very unhappy. She immediately orders Negoro's shadow to transform and rush up to attack Ushio. Shinpei's initial plan was just to come here to find information and then return to the loop. But now he can't stop Ushio anymore, because he also agrees with Ushio. They need to show that humans are not weak. Ushio punches Negoro's shadow, sending it to the counter immediately. Shinpei has approached Haruko with a nail gun. He was about to fire when the shadow leader appeared. He cuts off Ushio's hand immediately, making her collapse in pain. This one has already captured Mio. He will use her as a hostage so Shinpei and others can't act recklessly anymore. Takiko angrily shouts that this is not according to the agreement. Clearly, it had promised not to harm Mio. The shadow leader laughs, explaining to Mio that they would only live until tomorrow anyway. Dying a day earlier wouldn't matter. Her family has done very well in the past years. He fires his gun at Takiko, but Sue jumps out to block it. Meanwhile, Nagumo sits down in a corner of the cave. She has lost too much blood to walk anymore. At this time, Tetsu discovers Nagumo. He fearfully tells her everything. Mio was captured by a monster, and he was only able to run away in fear. For Nagumo, Tetsu's appearance here is a good thing. She asks him to help her stand up, not to go to the hospital, but she wants Tetsu to take her deeper inside this cave. The next shot rings out, taking Takiko's life. Shinpei watches but can't do anything. Haruko now speaks up, asking Ushio to come to her. With Mio as a hostage, Ushio is forced to approach. Shinpei shouts, wanting to take Ushio's place. Immediately, Haruko gouges out Shinpei's right eye. Ushio has already been subdued by it. At this point, it was about to kill Ushio. But after seeing Ushio defeat Negoro so easily, Haruko acknowledges Ushio's strength. Killing her now would be a pity, so it decides to fix Ushio's brain. As for Shinpei, although his right eye has been gouged out, it automatically returns to him. This power, Haruko cannot take away. So the shadow leader grabs Shinpei by the neck and pulls him to where he is. He knows very well what Shinpei's power is. That right eye allows Shinpei to rewind time when he dies, to create a world as he wishes. A power beyond even the gods. But fortunately, currently, Shinpei can't control that power. So they just need to keep Shinpei alive so he can't reverse time. After saying this, he crushes Mio's head in front of Shinpei. So it's all over. Shinpei has been held tightly by him. At this point, if he can't die, he can't fix any mistakes anymore. Just then, a sound rings out. It's Tetsu and Nagumo. She has fired a shot straight into the shadow leader's head. This much isn't enough to kill him. Then Nagumo and Tetsu also collapse under his gun. But for Shinpei, this much disturbance from them is more than enough. In just a moment when the shadow leader lets him slip, Shinpei has taken poison to commit suicide. He spits blood, kneeling down in pain, but still gritting his teeth, swearing to everyone that he will return to the loop. No matter how many times, there will certainly be a day when he will destroy them. At this moment, Haruko calls the shadow leader. Ushio is reversing her control. Haruko can no longer control Ushio, so she orders the shadow leader to kill Ushio immediately. He receives the order and stabs straight down, but Ushio has disappeared immediately. Shinpei has taken Ushio with him into the loop. Ushio cries uncontrollably because she couldn't protect everyone. But Shinpei is very firm, reminding Ushio that now is not the time to mourn. They will start over to save everyone. Shinpei reverses back to the past, to the moment he is meeting Nagumo at the secret location. In the previous loop, Ushio wasn't standing beside him. But now Ushio gradually appears before Nagumo and Mr. Nezu. Now they believe Shinpei has the ability to reverse time. Ushio rushed forward and hugged Nagumo tightly, bursting into tears. It was so good to see her again. Mr. Nezu was very cautious, raising his gun because he discovered Ushio was a shadow. At this time, Nagumo stopped him. She wanted to hear what had happened before. So Shinpei told them everything about the power of his left eye. Shinpei didn't know how to use it or why he had it. He only remembered getting this eye when he set foot on the island. With her intelligence, Nagumo immediately deduced that Haruko had gouged out Shinpei's eye. Yet he still didn't lose that eye. This proved this eye didn't belong to her, but was just an object copied by the shadow. Combining all the information together, Nagumo had determined that Ushio was the one who gave this right eye to Shinpei. After that, she stepped forward to ask Shinpei, in his opinion, why had he failed in the previous time reversal? Shinpei had thought about this issue already. Perhaps it was because they had split up to act separately after defeating Shori's shadow. If possible, this time Shinpei wanted to cooperate with Nagumo. She agreed immediately, reaching out to shake hands with Ushio. To save time retelling, Ushio used her power to show Nagumo all the events from the previous return. Now Nagumo fully trusted Ushio. She was their ally, at least until now. Mr. Nezu, although reluctant, accepted after watching. Next, Nagumo pondered the Shadow Leader's plan. According to what Shinpei had heard, at the festival on the 24th, he would use a ton of people as food for Haruko, so she could be resurrected. Mr. Nezu also understood some of the issue. Shiori's shadow was just a part of her. That was why they had eliminated it. Yet it could still live. Ushio still felt something was off. Haruko was too weak to leave the cave, yet somehow Shiori's shadow was that strong. At this time, Nagumo asked about Shinpei's plan, what he intended to do next. Shinpei very much wanted to go straight down to that cave to eliminate Haruko. However, he didn't know how to defeat that shadow leader. As long as he was still there, they had no chance of winning. Ushio spoke up, advising Shinpei. In her opinion, they should still start with the fake Shiori shadow first. Mr. Nezu still didn't quite understand. If they couldn't kill it, why bother going there? Ushio raised her arm confidently declaring she had the ability to erase it. The events that followed were the same as in previous time reversals. After Ushio's funeral ended, Su went to see his father, wanting to talk more about his friend's death. Su's father didn't care and didn't want to see Su, but thanks to his mother's pleading, he agreed to meet him tonight. After that, he went out to call his comrades. He knew everything, from Nagumo's return to the island to Shinpei's investigation of the shadow disease. Shinpei knew too much, plus they had let Ushio's shadow escape, so he had decided to eliminate the entire Kofun family. That afternoon, Shinpei's group arrived in front of Shiori's house. When they heard Ushio declare she had the ability to erase the shadow, she and Mr. Nezu didn't believe it. But at least this was worth trying. At this moment, Shinpei suddenly asked Nagumo about her brother. 14 years ago, he had been killed, and according to what Shinpei knew, it could very well have been Haruko who did it. Shinpei already knew the truth, so Nagumo didn't hide anything from him anymore. Shinpei's phone rang. It was Mio calling. Shinpei sighed with relief. This proved Mio was still safe. He swore he wouldn't let Mio die again. Standing in front of the Koba grocery store, Nagumo had recorded the plan and then switched places with her second personality. About this plan, Shinpei had advised them to act exactly as in the previous reversal, meaning they would capture Shiori's shadow using Plan B. After listening to the recording, they acted immediately. It was still what happened before, asking permission to enter the house, then suddenly pulling out a hammer to hit them. Outside, after Shinpei confirmed there was no one around, he allowed Ushio to come out. As soon as she jumped out, she immediately showed Shinpei her new discovery. Ushio plucked a strand of hair and placed it on the ground. It transformed into two pieces of the nail gun, the gun that had been cut in half by the shadow leader. Shinpei immediately understood. So Ushio had the ability to take data from the previous reversal and use it for this reversal, a wonderful ability. Looking at this broken gun made Shinpei feel a bit regretful, but it didn't matter because Mr. Nezu had the original version of this gun. Just by copying the original, Ushio could immediately create another gun. That's enough small talk. Mr. Nezu reminded them to get into position. According to what Shinpei said, in just 2 more minutes, Shiori's shadow would escape through the window. Just as he finished speaking, the building's window shattered, followed by Nagumo flying down below, startling everyone. Nagumo weakly turned to tell them to run quickly. Before she could finish speaking, the shadow leader appeared and finished her off. Shinpei was completely dumbfounded, unable to understand. How could this guy appear here? At this moment, Shiori's shadow appeared. It laughed loudly, explaining to Shinpei that, as declared before, it had caught him. It wasn't just Shinpei who had the power to reverse time. It also had that ability, and it had marked Shinpei's right hand. Now, in any reversal of Shinpei's, it would know where he was and what he planned to do in order to hunt him down. The shadow leader rushed up to attack. Mr. Nezu held his gun and fired all 3 shots at his shadow, but it didn't work. This guy could still move. The situation was very dire. Ushio cut off Shinpei's head so he could enter the loop. While in the final second, she tried to copy the shadow leader to read his information. After that, she went into the loop with Shinpei. Ushio recounted everything to Shinpei. Just now, she had successfully copied, but it seemed this shadow leader was too different from the rest. Inside him was only emptiness. However, Ushio felt this guy smelled very similar to Haruko. Shinpei was still a bit worried, not knowing if they could defeat them in the next reversal. Hearing this, Ushio encouraged him. According to what they had just learned, that Haruko woman also had the ability to reverse time, so certainly she would hunt him in this next reversal, but it didn't matter. She still believed they would be the winners. The two successfully reversed time, but the scene before them made Shinpei somewhat surprised. According to his memory, it didn't rain on the 22nd. Just as he finished speaking, Nagumo, in a school uniform, entered the coffee store. Shinpei ran to grab the door handle, but he couldn't hold it and went straight through. Inside the restaurant were many customers. Based on the date written on the flower baskets, Shinpei realized this was 14 years ago. He immediately remembered that in the first reversal, he had also had a similar experience. He had seen the scene of Su saving Ushio by the beach. According to Ushio's guess, at that time, perhaps Shinpei had been viewing Mio's memories, and now perhaps they were watching Nagumo's memories. The coffee and restaurant was celebrating today, so it was very crowded, and Nagumo didn't like such crowded places. So she left her brother Ryunosuke behind and was about to sneak off elsewhere when her friend Asako appeared and stopped her. Shinpei's parents were also present at the restaurant. It had been a long time since Shinpei had seen his parents' faces, making him very emotional. As for Nagumo, she had carried a cold personality since childhood, sitting at the dining table without even talking to her brother or Asako. It wasn't until Ryunosuke told the story about his sister's new friend that Nagumo embarrassingly scolded them. With her cold personality, neither Asako nor Ryunosuke believed Nagumo would make a new friend. After that, Asako curiously asked about her new friend. Nagumo had met the new friend on a mountain. Immediately, the scene Shinpei saw changed, pulling him to the front door of Su's family's old clinic. At this time, Nagumo led her brother and Asako to meet her new friend. Nagumo pointed them to the second floor. Every day, they would meet at a fixed time when the light from that room emitted. It sounded like a ghost story, making Asako somewhat scared. However, after waiting for a long time without seeing anyone appear, Ryunosuke and Asako lost patience and left first. Nagumo still insisted on staying to meet. Just a moment later, from the second floor, a small figure appeared, making Shinpei completely dumbfounded. Wasn't this Haruko? What was she doing here?